All right? You can get it from probably GC website or the ACS website. It's published by Pacific Press. We had, what was it, 25 hours of presentation on this. It was pretty grueling. We started at 8 o'clock in the morning, ended at 8:30 at night. And for 2.5 days, we were exposed to different presenters. It wasn't only him, but he had the bulk of the presentation going and some 650 odd slides that he was working off. And unfortunately, he didn't share the slides with us, but we're going to try and unravel some of this this morning. We don't have enough time. Somehow it's worked out that this coming Friday, I will be speaking, and again on Sabbath. So we'll continue to unravel this as we go through the lesson study today, as well as then this coming weekend. And so I'd encourage you to come and join, get the book, and let's have some opportunity to study, maybe from a bit of a different perspective of what the Lord is actually calling us to in Isaiah 58. So we're having some challenges here, but we'll keep moving. So worship the Creator, right? And can you advance my slide? This is not working. And it's on. All right. So 58, verse 6 and 7. Does somebody want to read that for us? Put up your hand if you want to share. And there we go. Young, thank you.
Is it not that the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break your every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out when you see the naked, and that you cover him and not hide yourself from your own flesh? Isaiah 58, 6 and 7.
All right, so some interesting concepts here. Christ was pretty straight with the Pharisees when he talked about their fasting, right? What did he accuse them of? Don't all talk at once now.
What they didn't do.
What they didn't do, and what was that?
Take care of other people.
Take care of other people. All right? And so they were traditionalists. All right? They came to church on Sabbath. Oh, careful now, Sparrow. They came to church on Sabbath. They were dressed, thank you. They were dressed appropriately in the correct attire as would be appreciated on a Sabbath morning, right? We all got our suits on. Ladies are looking, dressed smart. And there was a pastor that came to a church. He was the new pastor in the church. And he decided to do something a little different for his introduction. He dressed as a homeless person and sat in the parking lot of the church. Everyone walked by him, and only one person greeted him and offered any kind of connection. As the church started, he walked in, walked down, and sat on the front row. And there was a muttering amongst the brethren. Right? At which point he started to shed his homeless clothes and presented himself in appropriate attire and introduced himself as the new pastor to the church. Everybody was very apologetic as they left that day. All right? But how often is this a reality with us? So, is not this the fast I've chosen, right? Christ's chosen fast is a little different to maybe what ours is and what our tradition indicates. All right? And so as we unravel this, let's have a look at what we should be doing. And we know it, right? It's to loose the bands of wickedness. Well, how do we do that? Right? And the only way we can do that is by connecting with people where they are. Okay? And we'll look at that a little bit more as well. To undo the heavy burdens. You know, people are burdened out there. If you just look to this last week's events have been really tragic, right? I mean, started last weekend, 29 people shot and killed. Many landed up in hospital. And it seemed like every day on the news there was some kind of huge human atrocity, from shootings to stabbings to more shootings, and so it went on, right? What is happening to humanity, right? And the reality is they are reaping what they have sown, okay? But we are called to help undo the heavy burdens. And let me just, you know, we oftentimes we look out there and we gasp and say, well, how is this even possible? But what's happening within our own ranks, right? And it's actually scary. I'm going to share a quote with you a little bit later about what's happening in our church and why in our churches, right? There's so much brokenness in our churches today amongst our church members, right? And people are streaming out of the church today. And I think the figure was given in the U.S. alone, some 18,000 people have left the church up to this point this year. All right? The Adventist church. Right. The Adventist church. 18,000 people. Right? And I'll show you an interesting quote that is commented on as to why. Let the oppressed go free, break every yoke. Well, is it possible for us to break the yokes? I thought Christ invited us to follow him because his burden is light and his yoke is easy. Right now he's saying us, you break every yoke. Okay? Is not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house, when thou seest the naked, and thou cover him, and thou hide not thyself from thy own flesh. An interesting story again of a doctor in India that decided he was going to do something different to help people. And after his day's work, he would go onto the street and start bathing homeless men, all right, in the slums of Calcutta. True worship is not just something that happens during a religious ritual. True worship is also about living a life that shares God's concerns for the well-being of others and that seeks to lift up those who have been downtrodden and forgotten. True worship should not be inconsistent with the character of the one being worshipped. Right? And so questions we've got to ask ourselves here this morning: is our worship service consistent with the one that is being worshipped? Should we be sitting here? What do you think?
Yeah, this was a challenging lesson. So
We think of worship as we're coming to church and praising God, or something like that. But worship is a life. It's what you do throughout your life. And reflecting the character of our Creator is the goal, right? Daily.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think we have an idea of how to worship as we reflect on the life of Christ. You know, he made it his custom to do that. I think there's a time and place for us to meet like this. The Bible says, iron strengtheneth iron, and that we should not forsake the assembling of the brethren. The question, I'm not sure, is, or the unknown is, how do we do it? Do we need to meet in this fashion? Do we need to meet in a building? Well, you know, we can get carried away, but I think the concept is consistent, that we should worship together, study, and then, as my brother shared, we need to, that worship is something that we do every single day of our lives, and it's reflected. This lesson, and last week's lesson really touches the heart, true personal religion, and it really opens my eyes, and I'm questioning my own worship, my own life. Do we do that? Do we, you know, what Isaiah 58, actually, verse 6 and 7, do we live that experience? So,
what is God worth? What is the worship of God to me? And this must be reflected in how I live. My entire philosophy of life is surrounded by what God is worth to me. And this is worship for me.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, Nick.
I'm impressed that worshiping it's a character. It's reflecting a kind of character. So it's not. Sometimes in nowadays, if you look to many religious ways of worship, we can be confused and we can have a bad impression, or we can think that, oh, I'm going to worship 15 minutes, 10 minutes. But when we talk about the character, it's like reflecting his character, reflecting his light, and that have to be continuous. And sometimes we do that, and they say the worship should not be inconsistent. That's the problem. That we're not worshiping just on Sabbath or when we go for a mission trip, but should be a lifestyle.
Okay. A lifestyle, right? And we're going to unravel that a little bit as well. So, Jesus' ultimate concern that the worship of his followers will result in a passion for meeting the needs of others. Right? So Christ's concern, his ultimate concern, was for meeting others' needs. All right. So we need to look at this concept then of worship integrity. Okay? Worship integrity means our lives must match what we know in order to be true to God. Our lives must what? Match what we know in order to be true to God. So in other words, it's not just head knowledge, it's got to come out and live out in me. Right? Thus we must worship in spirit and in truth. So in other words, the worship that we want to do in spirit and in truth, we have to be consistent with our knowledge. Okay? And there's an interesting quote that says, we will not only be judged on what we know, but on what we could have known. Right? And so there's a continual growing process then in the accumulation of knowledge to be lived out in our lives. Okay? So, yes, Scott.
I was just going to say, I was thinking along that line before that came up, but it is very important for us to study, because what we know, we can't do what we don't know. But if it stops right there, if what we learn doesn't change our life, it's 100% useless. So, it's just my thoughts on it.
Amen. Right? If what we learn doesn't change our lives, it's wasted. Right? Okay. All right. So, leading servants then, serving with Jesus, not just for Jesus. Okay? See the difference? Right? Serving with Jesus, not just for Jesus. If we were serving for Jesus, it's a different context to serving with him and doing what he did. All right, in Isaiah 58, we've got a couple of words that kind of summarize the issues that are covered in Isaiah 58. You've got orthodoxy and orthopraxy. All right? So, what is orthodoxy? Right? In the Greek, it's orthos, it's right, doxa, opinion, thus right thinking or right believing. So, the knowledge that we gain helps us to think correctly. Right? Am I right? Okay? So we need to be studying to gain the knowledge to help adjust my thinking process so that I'm thinking correctly. But then orthopraxy is right, but praxis acts. Thus, right practicing or right behaving. So my right thinking needs to equate to right practicing. My right believing needs to equate to my right behaving. So another way to define orthodoxy is knowing the truth, and orthopraxy is showing the truth or living it. The passion of orthodoxy must be wedded to the compassion of orthopraxy. Okay? The passion of orthodoxy, right thinking, must be married to the compassion of right doing. Okay? So it's no good me just saying, this is what I am. I need to live out what I am. Okay? So I can say I am a Seventh-day Adventist, and I can be in church on Sabbath. But when I walk out the door, I'm proud, I'm rude, I'm not compassionate to my fellow man. Right? Right thinking to right living and compassion. Okay, Chris.
Yeah. So when we walk out the door, we're taking the church with us, right? We're bringing the church to the community.
There's an interesting church that had on the exit of the parking lot, you entering the service area.
Amen.
All right? You're entering the service area. But I just want to bring this a little closer home. All right? Many times, we even don't have that compassion within the church. How do we treat each other? Right? Do we have that compassion to our fellow brothers and sisters? And let me expand this just a little bit to us at 435 Lifestyle Lane. Right? In our organization, dealing with one another. And unfortunately, it's a stark reality that sometimes the people we treat the worst are those that are closest to us. Okay? Anyway, we'll unravel this some more as we go, depending on time, and that clock has got a problem. All right, so changing our perspective, all right? How do we attract people to what we are doing? What is God up to in this neighborhood? And Sang Kwan made an interesting concept. You know, many times we go into the neighborhood and we want to do what we want to do in the neighborhood. And he says, no, we need to have a different perspective. We need to find out what God is doing in the neighborhood and then get on board with God's program in the neighborhood. So in other words, sometimes our communities around us are doing a work that we are not part of, but that we should get involved in, right? What are the ways we need to change in order to engage people in our community who no longer consider church a part of their lives? Right? There are many Adventists today that are falling away from our ranks. There are many of other denominations that are falling away from church ranks. I'm going to jump a couple of slides here. I'm looking for something specific. Well, I can't find it just quickly. Anyway, we'll continue. So, concentrating on what is God up to in this neighborhood? What are the ways we need to change in order to engage the people in our community who no longer consider church a part of their lives? So, that's a thought process that we need to address as a church here, as a campus, right? What is God doing in the community? Are we on board with the community? What do we need to change in order to get there? So, if you go to Matthew 25, somebody give me a quick summary there of what's happening in Matthew 25. The sheep and the goats, right? Now, I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to actually work with these animals. Right? It's interesting. A sheep is a follower, right? And there was an interesting slide that was put up on the screen in our training with a bunch of sheep standing at the start line of a race. And everybody saying, well, you go. And the next one saying, no, it's okay, you go, right? And the other one saying, well, you go. And unless you've got one that is willing to go, nobody's going, right? Another interesting aspect is as you count sheep, and when sheep herders have many, many sheep, right? And they normally count them through a gate or a small enclosure that you can count them as they run by you. And when you do that, and if you put a board down and the first sheep jumps, guess what happens? The whole flock jumps. Okay? It's very interesting to watch. They just jump, and nobody knows what they're jumping from behind. They just jump when they get to that spot. They don't even see it because there's so many of them, right? So sheep are followers. A goat is something completely different. A goat has an independent mindset, and they will look for holes in fences to get out, and once they're out, everybody's out, okay, including the sheep that are grazing with them. So a goat does its own thing, right? And Jesus is speaking to people who have worked with these animals and know the mentality of the animal, right? And so we need to understand that mentality, sheep and goats. Who are you following? Are you following the goat? Well, hopefully not. Hopefully you're following the shepherd. All right? So this whole concept. So here, Christ on the Mount of Olives pictured to his disciples the scene of the great judgment day, and he represented its decision as a turning upon one point. When the nations are gathered before him, there will be but two classes, and their eternal destiny will be determined by what they have done or have neglected to do for him in the person of the poor and suffering. All right? Now, is poor just financially poor? All right? Somebody can have millions of dollars and still be poor. In what way are they poor? They're poor in spirit. And Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, because why? What are they going to inherit? The kingdom of heaven. When we're poor in spirit, we start to recognize something. What do we recognize? Our need. Right? Our what? Our deficiencies. Right? And so, suffering, and I think suffering today, I don't know that there's anybody that can put up their hand and say they haven't experienced some kind of suffering. Right? And that's a whole another discussion we can get into that we don't have time for. So, some interesting quotes here. My friend once said, Christianity is a great lifestyle. But I took issue with that. Christianity is not a great lifestyle. Christianity is life. Okay? Yeah, there are benefits to the lifestyle of Christianity, but it doesn't stop there. Christianity is life. If Christianity is simply a lifestyle, then we would be Christians without Christ. And so what does that mean? If you are a Christian without Christ, you are what? You are not a Christian. Okay? Right? So we are change agents. We are evangelists and disciples at any given moment of our lives. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Galatians 6:10. Right? So Paul is calling us to do what? To do good. Okay? As we have opportunity, do good to how many people? Just some? Does that include our enemies? Yeah. Especially to those who belong to the family of God. To promote social justice, and this is a whole study all on its own there, just on justice. The word righteousness is what? Justice. Right? And so Christ's righteousness is Christ's justice. Right? And so we get a deeper understanding then of what that can mean. Okay? To promote social justice, Jesus in Psalms 82 verse 3 and 4 says, defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Okay? Defending weak and fatherless, the cause of the poor and the oppressed, rescuing weak and needy, delivering people from the hand of wickedness. Richard Stearns makes this quote, and it's pretty straight. For I was hungry while you had all you needed. I was thirsty, but you drank bottled water. I was a stranger, and you wanted me deported. I needed clothes, but you needed more clothes. I was sick, and you pointed out the behaviors that led to my sickness. You know, that kind of hit a note with me here, especially in our lifestyle center work. I was sick, and you pointed out the behaviors that led to my sickness. Right? Hopefully, as we do that, we are identifying the cause and gently then lead people not on a judging component of because that they're sick, but lead people to the change of behavior. I was in prison and you said I was getting what I deserved. Right? How do we relate to people? You know, San Juan puts a slide on the board of the picture of a person being interviewed for an elementary school as a science and math teacher. Okay? The first person was a man dressed in a suit, looking very proper. The next person was a woman, dressed very appropriately, kind face and expression. The next person was a person that wasn't dressed so well. And the last person was a guy that had a mohawk with a cross like etched in orange on his head and tattoos down his arms. And the question is, well, which one would you choose? Guess what? All of us would choose the first two. Because why? They present themselves in a way that we deem as appropriate. The guy with the most qualifications was the guy with the mohawk and the tattoos because he was a NASA scientist and loved children. So many times we don't dig beyond the exterior and find out where the heart is, right? We just judge and move from there. Reggie McNeil, this is the quote I was looking for earlier. A growing number of people are leaving the institutional church for a new reason. They are not leaving because they have lost faith. They are leaving the church to preserve their faith. Wow. They are not leaving because they have lost faith. They are leaving the church to preserve faith. Folks, we have a problem. I would encourage you to listen to Jared Thurman's sermon on Sabbath. No, it wasn't on Sabbath. Friday night, I think it was, at ASI. Louisville, we have a problem. And he started unpacking the politics of our church leadership and what it is doing to the church today. Are we a church that encourages the preservation of faith, or are we a church that is undermining people's faith and people leave here to preserve their faith? Some serious questions, folks, that we've got to ask ourselves, right? As an organization, we have to ask ourselves these questions as well. How do we come across? How are we relating to people? They contend that the church no longer contributes to their spiritual development. So if I had to ask you a question here this morning, don't put up your hands to answer. If I had to ask you a question here this morning, this church, is this a church that contributes toward your spiritual development? Hold on.
I'd like to add a component to that because that's a very serious statement that's being made. But I would like to add that we need to look at ourselves and ask the question, what am I doing to fulfill that need for somebody else?
I was coming to that. Thank you. Yeah. Young.
Yeah, I was also like to add to that as well, that a lot of times when we're contributing, you know, there's always in a church that one group of people who do most of the work for the church, and then everyone just kind of comes and goes. And I hear the same thing over and over again from the people who either have left or go to another church or something, and they always say that, they felt being like they're being judged or something, And actually, being to every church, to many churches, I don't think that's the real reason. I think there's a deeper reason, and it's usually the lack of building a relationship in that church. Not the aspect of feeling judged. You feel judged because you're not doing anything and other people are doing something, and you're not, you set yourself apart from doing those, not wanting to do those things. And when you don't do those things, you feel judged. That's usually the reason, right? But the other aspect that a lot of people don't want to deal with is the fact that they feel lonely in that church, right? They don't feel the compassion, the love, the friendship, the building of any relationship in that particular church. And that's where they leave. It's not feeling like judged upon, right? Because we shouldn't judge, but at the same time, we need to have a relationship with one another first. And if we don't do it the correct way, if we don't do it the right way, where we're nurturing that relationship rather than judging that relationship, the other person, then that's when they feel that way, right?
Amen. Anybody else? This is a pretty serious statement.
An institution where we have young people, one of the things that they look out for or maybe easily resonate with them is seeing hypocrisy. For example, you will have people who will pass you along the way, never say hello. And then those same persons will have pious platitudes from a pulpit. It's not very easy to sit down and take that. So some people, especially the young, I believe, are more easily to be moving away to find something else. Those of us who are older, we get used to it after a while, so we sit and take it.
We get stuck in our traditions. There's a big difference in mindset between modern and postmodern, right? That's a whole different unwrap, but I didn't have time to put that slide in here as well. All right, serious stuff to consider, especially for us as a church, as an organization, right? Are we helping people to preserve their faith, or are we discouraging people that they feel they need to leave to preserve their faith? Evaluate your church. Is it a place of healing or oppression? How so? What can be done to fix it? Scott.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what we were just talking about. It's not only important here in the church, but outside of here, how we interact and react with other people. We're going to be held responsible for how our actions affect other people's coming to or running away from Christ. So, it's easy to come to church and put on our smile and then during the week we don't treat people so well sometimes. So it's 24/7. We have to, and I'm talking to myself here too. It's really important to think before we react, especially with other people.
So, what Scott is highlighting there, are you a proactive person or a reactive person? Right? If you think of a boxer in a ring, when he's moving back and gets into the corner, he's reacting, right? But if you're on your front foot and you're coming forward and taking proactive decisions, somebody else is reacting, and you vacillate between proaction and reaction every day of your life. What are you choosing? You can choose not to be reactive, right? You can choose to be proactive, but it takes effort to do that. And many times we just revert to reactivity. Okay? Is our church a place of healing or oppression? Right? And We can argue it back and forth, but where's the reality, right? Our organization, is it a place of healing? And we said, oh, well, of course. We teach healing, we provide remedies for healing, but how often does oppression go with that? And what can we do to combat that? All right? So some serious questions, and I would encourage you to ask yourself those questions on a personal basis. All right? Because as a body, unless we embrace these questions and concepts individually, it's not going to happen as a body. So we each need to evaluate ourselves as to where we're at with that, and then together we can bring about a change in our church and our community. Now I'm just going to run through these. Some of you have seen these before. There's some mentoring principles, and they're very interesting. Members stay in a church or an organization if their tasks and procedures are clear. How do you equip and develop new members as disciples? What materials do they receive to clarify their tasks and procedures? What areas of confusion exist? How do you know? All right? And so, if we ask people to perform certain functions in the church, how are we equipping those people to perform those functions? Are their tasks and procedures clear? And this, if that happens, people are more encouraged to stay and to stay in the position. And I just want to throw something out here to you. San Juan is very much opposed, and the research backs it up, that this whole election process that we go through, nominating committee every year, is a farce. And we cannot continue to create consistency if we bring about changes every year. Right? And so that's something for you to think about. And don't stone me as I walk out the door. All right. Members stay if they feel welcome and appreciated. How do you ensure that church leaders and members welcome new members? Okay, so we have a greeting committee at the door. Okay? Sandy and Jeffrey, did you feel welcome this morning? All right. Okay. Amen. All right. And so, but it doesn't stop there. All right? It doesn't stop there. We need to continue working that people feel welcome. How do you recognize and reward them for their support? Okay? Members stay if they feel welcome and appreciated. Okay? The third one, members stay if they bond to someone within the organization or the church. All right? So, we quite a few people here this morning, right? And most of you attend this church. And who have you bonded to recently within this church? That a person is going to feel that they have a connection with you. All right? What opportunity? Sorry. What opportunities do members have to get to know staff and other volunteers? What opportunities do your assignments offer? Do you use teams or buddy systems to accomplish goals? How do you ensure that members feel connected to others? Does your unit socialize outside of worship times? All right? Or do we come and go like ships passing in the night? Okay? All right. Principle number 4, and we stuck. All right, it's coming. Anybody got any comments on those thus far? Yeah, Chris. Mike. Oh, man.
I guess I came to the right church today. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
It was interesting that the Lord brought me to Christian service before I studied this lesson this week. In the section called the call to arouse, is very appropriate to what you're talking about. And I would really commend that to us gathered here today, because this is internal reflection. It isn't, oh, what are we going to study? It's what am I going to do?
Right.
And so I really appreciate the direction that the Holy Spirit is bringing this church in. Praise God.
Amen. Anybody else? Before we move on, we've got 5 minutes left. Okay, members stay if they receive feedback that connects their responsibility to program success. So if we have an initiative of a certain program and we've got members involved, we need to give feedback back to those that are involved so that they can connect that with service. How do church leaders monitor and help develop member competencies? Are we offering classes or training for people to move into certain arenas, right? And we have had some trainings that have happened here in our church, but the question is it enough? Do we need to offer more so that we can equip ourselves to improve our competencies, right? Do we as a church offer a mentoring program? And I think here's where we are lacking, right? Do we offer that program? And maybe we can identify some areas where we do some of that, but how can we improve? All right? Number 5, members stay if they have a voice in the organization. Are you open to suggestions and feedbacks from your members? What opportunities do you create to receive feedback? How do you involve members in planning new initiatives? How do you know they are invested? All right? And so we need to give opportunity to church members to give feedback to leadership so that they can feel invested. Number 6, members are motivated by opportunities to learn new skills. What are the skills members can learn from their assignments, right? So as we create initiatives for the church to get involved in, right, are we able to teach new skills to people? How can you identify the skills your members want to learn and continually allow them these opportunities? Number 7, members are motivated by opportunities to change the world. Does that excite you? Do you want to change the world? Right? How can you design community outreach ministries so that you see the opportunity to create change and make a difference? Okay? Right now, we have Herschel and Johnny that are moving through our community on a referral basis and doing surveys with members of our community as to their perceived needs. All right? It's very interesting to see what is happening and the feedback that we are getting from this. Okay? It's very positive, right? And even some of our community leaders are requesting Bible study, right? And so as we move out in this initiative to be followed by our campus outreach and, friendship evangelism, it's going to play a pivotal role. What ways can you identify and recognize members' ability and progress in creating change, right? Change is hard. As human beings, we are lazy and we like to be stuck in our ruts. But we need to change, right? And God can empower us to change if we are willing. And it's managed in the appropriate way. Here's an interesting quote by Bernard Shaw. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the community. And as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Wow. Right? Same man that wrote the book, 1984. San Juan, we must make the shift from just going to a church to being a church in the world around us. We must pray for God's intervention in our own lives, listen to people's struggles and challenges, and look for opportunities in the neighborhoods and communities that surround us to serve and demonstrate God's love. Only then will we witness real change, changes in lives, and changes in our communities. Right? A shift from going to a church to being a church. Do you just come here, or are you part of this church? Right? How much do you get involved will show you the answer to that question. Okay? God's intervention in our own lives. Listen to people's struggles and challenges. Look for opportunities in the neighborhoods and communities that surround us to serve and demonstrate God's love. And that doesn't always result in a baptism into this church. It might one day. But seeds are planted, and we show that we love people because it's about people. Okay, in closing here, if our Sabbath worship service is true worship in spirit and in truth, we will leave the worship place ready to serve God in the way that He calls us in the world. True worship is of the heart, rather than worship consisting essentially of ritual forms conducted at some particular place. In spirit and in truth means in all sincerity, with the highest faculties of the mind and emotions, applying the principles of truth to the heart. If we have truly worshipped, we will not only be closer to our God, but closer to the objects of His tender regard. Those who are poor, needy, and suffering come close to the great heart of pitying love. And let the current of that divine compassion flow into your heart and from your heart to the hearts of others. Let the tenderness and mercy that Jesus has revealed in His own precious life be an example to us of the manner in which we should treat our fellow beings. Folks, this was a powerful lesson. And it's so much more than just, half an hour, 40 minutes can touch on. I'd encourage you to go get this book, right? Read it, study it. Burst the Bubble by Dr. San Juan. It's interesting. A lot of the information I've shared with you this morning comes out of this book. And I pray that as you consider these deep issues and our walk with the Lord and our involvement in our church, that you will be challenged and stimulated to change. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity of the challenge that you've given us in Isaiah 58. Help us to really consider our walk and whether we are a sheep or a goat. And I pray that you would lead us on gently as you have promised to do, from light to light and glory to glory. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hidden among the outskirts of Chattanooga, there is a place called Wildwood, a community of Seventh-day Adventists that focus on the ministry of Christ by claiming lives for His kingdom through medical missionary work, health evangelism, and social interactions.
The environment, the mindset of the place is beautiful. It's not the money, it's the love, the understanding, the person in general, the physical part and the spiritual part. We can't come here and not smiling. Everybody wave to you, hi! So it's new, but I love it. I hope I can use that to change the mindset of my people where I came from.
What I love about Wildwood is that Wildwood is so much more than what happens here on this campus. It may start here, but then people go out from here. And they go out and they start lifestyle centers, they start projects, they do mission work, they change their communities, they work with their churches. Wildwood is basically like a launching pad. It's somewhere that people come, they get inspired, they get trained, but then they go to all corners of the world and do amazing things for the Lord.
How does something like this happen?
Wildwood is the result of many miracles. It's inspiring reading and hearing about those numerous miracles from the many resources that we have available. The men and women who started Wildwood had a vision. They believed in a ministry that would impact the world as well as their local community. We are now living in the consummation of that vision as medical missionary work has extended across the globe.
They saw something in their time, and now we have the opportunity to take things to another level.